Alright, so I just saw Eureka 7 High Evolution 1 in theaters, and I wanted to talk about it because I think there's been a lot of misinformation about this as a movie, and I think it's an interesting concept in general. So, for starters, as this is sort of a compilation movie, it's not really a compilation movie, and we'll get into that. There's going to be spoilers for the original Eureka 7, and actually the movie using on-text screen, like annotations, spoils the original Eureka 7 in like the first 2 minutes. So heads up, if you haven't seen the original Eureka 7, you're going to want to watch that if you have any interest in this, because if not, this is going to be completely incomprehensible to you. It's really a for people who have seen Eureka 7 thing. That said, let's get into what it is, since it isn't a compilation movie. So, this was announced a couple years ago with a couple other Eureka 7 High Evolution movies. There's going to be 3 of them. The marketing kind of indicated that they were going to be themed around characters, which is true, or at least the first one was very much so a character study, more so than summing up what happened in the original series, and that's kind of interesting. To me, at least. I could see why that would be really frustrating if you're going to it expecting it to sum up stuff that happened. But I will say, as far as Eureka 7 media goes, it's definitely the one I've watched, contrasting with, say, AO or Pocketful of Rainbows. This is definitely the Eureka 7 media I saw that felt like, oh, this feels like the original series, much more so to me. This feels like it has the same kind of attitude, and there's a lot of reverence for the original show in there. So if you like the original show, I'm going to give you a recommendation right now before we get into spoilers. If you like the original Eureka 7, go out and check this out. If you haven't seen it and you want to check this out, watch it and then check this out. Don't watch this on its own. Like, you're not going to get anything out of it. So yeah, let's get into the format, because I think that's where we can kind of understand what this is, since again, it's not a compilation film, or not a conventional compilation film at the very least. So High Evolution opens on like a 25-ish minute long sequence that's all new footage about Adrock Thurston and the first Summer of Love, a big event from Eureka 7 that is talked about a lot but never depicted on screen. And this whole sequence this is the money shots. This is what's in the trailers and stuff. This is all new footage. It's all extremely high budgeted action stuff. There's this real big sense of scale, and the sequences kind of hop from perspective to perspective. We mostly stick around Adrock Thurston, but we get young Holland and Dewey, we get Eureka, we get Charles and Ray Beams, and we get Talho, and it sort of floats from these people's perspectives, this giant war-like scenario. It's very similar in terms of scope and the way it's kind of depicted to, say, Gundam The Origin 5's big colony drop sequence, where it's flashing back and forth. There's this real sense of weight. There's big, very high budget, really good looking 2D animation. They brought back most of the original team for it. The music is very Eureka 7. Again, a lot of like the composer and stuff came back for it. And there's that kind of fusion of symphonic music and house and stuff like that that shows up throughout it. Music in general throughout the film, including the recap sequences, is really good. So after this sequence plays out, we cut into a few kind of scant minutes of new footage that introduces and bookends the compilation stuff. And then during the compilation stuff, it goes back and forth chronologically, but mostly sticks to the first episode, the Experience episode, or specifically the one where Eureka gets covered in the pink scrub coral stuff, and then the episodes where Charles and Ray Beams have adopted Renton. And we go back and forth there, and they even play some of the scenes at the same time. And the whole movie, but specifically this part of it, has these annotations on screen which explain kind of the world and minutia of the world of Eureka 7. And they go from being like pretty like, oh, that's major world building stuff, like how trapper waves affect people, pretty significant, and then some of them are just comically insignificant. Like we get the bicycle, or not bicycle, the motorcycle helmet rules for Renton's hometown are one of the annotations at one point, and the movie doesn't like freeze frame for them. They come up and they're there for like an eighth of a second, and reading them, they're in Japanese and English, but reading them is a challenge, but they're not super important. They mostly are there to just establish a timeline that isn't really there. The original, the best of my knowledge, the original Eureka 7 almost never uses on-screen text, not for settings, not for timescale, nothing. So it's kind of weird seeing like, oh, that's how long these events took to play out in the original series. And seeing where locations are was kind of funny. I didn't realize the big city where the hospital Vodarak girl sequence, again, a big thing in the original series, and it's key here because again they're kind of going over that arc. Was in a place called New Quebec. That was kind of funny to me. The footage at that point is just old footage. That's, I guess the lines have been re-recorded and they've been upscaled. They've added stuff to the background. There's a lot of little like touches and stuff. The one I noticed is in episode 1, they added a bunch of posters of Anemone where you can't read the name or her name or anything, and they're on like the side of buses and stuff. Very well integrated. If you weren't super familiar with the show, you'd miss it. The narration during these sequences kind of establishes that this is Renton's story. Like, this is really a character study of Renton, and in particular relating to the concept of fatherhood. We get the Adrock sequences early on, and we get the Charles sequences, which are all very themed around like family, but specifically fatherhood. And you kind of have these two examples of, you know, Adrock is this great hero, but he's absent from Renton's life, and Charles is this kind of morally ambiguous mercenary, but he's also like a doting and respectful father. And the kind of idea is that from these two father figures, Renton kind of figures out how to be a dad, which is a big theme in the original Eureka 7. So I mean, in that respect, it's more recapping the kind of emotions and themes of the series than the events, because again, you don't get huge important events in this. It doesn't serve to tell you what the plot of the original show was really in any capacity. So that being said, as a fan, I liked it. I had a good time. The Summer of Love stuff, again, beautiful. I'm glad I saw that on a big screen because it's some of the best looking animation I think Bones has ever put out. Really cool digital compilation effects and all sorts of other stuff, but really mostly just a good looking 2D animated mecha sequence on the big screen, which is something of a novelty these days where so much of the mecha stuff is CG. So it was cool to see that. Other than that, I thought I had these figured out, given that like as I'm going through this, I'm like, okay, I get it. Renton's perspective. We're gonna see, they wanted to do the Summer of Love, and that's easy to tie into Renton's character development. So they did a movie where they go over, that was interesting. So I was like, oh, so then what do they do for the Eureka and Anemone movies? Because that's kind of how they made it seem. They had the 3 posters of each of their faces, and then the poster for High Evolution 1 is Renton, and very Renton focused, which makes sense because the film is. So I'm like, oh, is the next one gonna be Anemone or Eureka? And actually, thankfully, we do get a preview clip at the end of the movie after the credits. And it kind of defies description. I think if I describe it here, it's just going to raise more questions. But the one thing it did answer is it is certainly Anemone focused. She seems to be the kind of centerpiece of it. Though we do see Eureka from the end of the series when she's got the wings and the green arm and stuff at the very end of the preview clip, but the preview clip itself is just bizarre. We've got like concert imagery. There's Anemone singing in some sort of concert, like idol group thing. It looked like, I could be wrong. There was some sort of jelly creature I didn't recognize immediately. Maybe it's something from the series that I just couldn't remember, but it was it existed. Pretty weird. And we had LFOs wearing soccer jerseys, I think presumably playing LFO-sized soccer, which, hey, if that happens, worth the price of admission alone. I will watch a movie that contains crazy mecha soccer. That sounds like a hoot, to be completely frank. In summary, Eureka 7 High Evolution is not for new fans of the series. This is not something you were going to show people to get them into Eureka 7. This is something for fans of the series who want to go back and kind of spend more time with these characters, get to know this world a little bit better, without just going back and rewatching the series again. Personally, that's fine. That's just as good to me as getting well-edited compilation movies, which in this day and age are kind of a novelty anyways. However, if that's not what you're looking for, this isn't your thing. But yeah, if you're like me and you just want to spend more time with these characters and get to know this world a little bit better, then I think it's fair to say you'll enjoy this. You'll have a good time. And it's worth checking out on home video or however you have a chance to check it out. Maybe not in theaters if you're not completely sold on that premise, but the nice thing about watching it on home video is if you're just interested in the Summer of Love stuff and you don't want to watch the recap stuff, you could always just watch the Summer of Love stuff and then turn it off.